What's up, guys? You're now listening to Devo with Uncle Theo. Today is day 90, and we're in a new book. We're in the book of Ruth. So we just wrapped up the book of Judges, and our reading plan has us covering the book of Ruth in one day. So it's 4 chapters. I know I try to always stay high at a 30,000 foot view, but man, 4 chapters in one day, that's a first for us. So as my custom, I'm going to try to highlight the major themes in this book and swoop down and grab things that may have slipped by your eye in your everyday reading. And so remember, we just left out of the time of Judges, and I want to show you the cohesiveness of the Bible. Look at verse 1. It says, "Now it came about in the days when the judges governed." You see that? It's connecting to the book of Judges because that's what was happening. We had no king. We left our patriarchs and our leaders like Joshua and Moses, and we were in the time of Judges. And so Ruth is telling us that we're still in that time. In fact, a lot of theologians say that Ruth is the diamond to the black backdrop of Judges. So anytime a jeweler shows you diamonds, he puts it on a black cloth, and that black cloth provides the perfect contrast to allow those diamonds to shine and show all of its glory. And that's what Judges does for the book of Ruth. We're in a time of complete wickedness. You remember how the book of Judges end. It ended with murder and kidnapping, trying to replace the tribe of Benjamin. And now we're here. And look at what it says. It says that there was a famine in the land. Why is there a famine? You remember the curses of Deuteronomy, right? God says that if you obey, blessings, but if you disobey, curses. And so if a famine is coming up in the land, they're receiving the curses of Deuteronomy. And we immediately get all of our characters of this story. In the first paragraph, it says, "There was a certain man with a wife and his 2 sons, and the name of the man was Elimelech, and his wife Naomi." And it says that the husband died, and she was left with her 2 sons. And they took for themselves Moabite women as wives. And remember, although this is going to turn out glorious, they're disobeying Deuteronomy 7, where God tells them not to intermarry with people of the pagan land. So they take wives. One name is Orpah, and the other's name is Ruth. Now they live about 10 years, and then both of the sons die. In verse 5, Mahlon and Chilion both died, and the woman was left bereaved with her 2 children and her husband. And I want you to notice in the text these singular pronouns that pick up. Look at what Naomi is doing. It says, she arose with her daughter-in-law, that she might return from the land of Moab. And she had heard in the land of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and given them food. So she departed from the place where she was. And you see that language, the author's trying to show you that Naomi is trying to get away from these daughters, Orpah and Ruth. And she tells them to go, each of you, to your mother's house. What's that a nice way of saying? I'm not your mother. Get away from me. Go back to where you came from. And look at what else she says, that you may find rest in the house of her husband. Who are their husbands? Those are Naomi's sons, and they're dead. So how can they, foreign women, find rest in the house of their husband? The only way to do that is to follow Naomi and play this out. So basically she's saying, hey, go find rest in your husband's house, and he's dead. That's her nice way of saying, look, I'm hopeless. It's over for me. You all go and die well also. So you see clearly, Naomi doesn't care about Orpah or Ruth. And she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept, and they said to her, no, we'll return with you and your people. And Naomi gets smart with them. She says, look, why would you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb, that they may be your husbands? Return, go, for I am too old to have a husband. And then she says, even if I said I have hope and take a husband tonight and also bear sons, will you therefore wait until they're grown? And she says, no, you all go on. It's harder for me than for you, because the hand of the Lord is against me. You remember this phrase? Similar phrase that Gideon says. When people are discouraged, this is the language that we start to use. And I want you all to pick up on this. This is how we start to talk when things get bad. We start to say that the Lord is moving and shaking, and he's with everybody but me. He's against me. But look, Orpah gets it. It says in verse 14 that Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. So Orpah gets it. She takes off. And we get the famous verse here in verse 15. It says, she said, behold, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth says, do not urge me to leave you or turn back from following you. For where you go, I will go. For where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. And we see Ruth here, the Moabitess, is displaying faith like Rahab. And we're starting to get a little evidence of conversion, that she's converting over to the one true God. She's not going back to those other gods that even Naomi told her to go back to. When given the option, just like Joshua, she says, me and my house, we're going to serve Yahweh. And Naomi says, look at verse 20. She reveals her hand of what I've been saying the entire time. And she says, do not call me Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. So the word Mara means bitter. So she's even changed her name to bitter. She says, I went out full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why do you call me Naomi, since the Lord is witness against me and the Almighty has afflicted me? And Naomi turned with her Ruth, the Moabitess. And I want you to keep seeing why the author keeps stating Ruth, the Moabitess. That's very significant. One, because she's a pagan woman. She's not of Israel. But two, do you remember how the Moabites came into being? After Lot fled Sodom and Gomorrah with his wife and his children, his wife turned to a pillar of salt on the way out. But his two daughters got him drunk and slept with him. They had incest with him. And the fruit of that were two children, Moab and Ben-Ammi. So through Moab, the Moabites come, and through Ben-Ammi, the Ammonites come. And so we get the origin of Ruth from this very wicked and sinful act. So she, by birth, automatically has a stigma attached to her name where she is an outcast. But I want you to see what the Lord does with this. But right now we got Naomi, who's changed her name to Mara, and she's bitter. But let's keep reading because we're about to get her better. So in chapter 2, it says, now Naomi had a kinsman of her husband, a man of great wealth, of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth, look at it, the Moabitess, said to Naomi, please let me go to the field and glean amongst the ears of the grain at the one in whose sight I may find favor. And she said to her, go, my daughter. You see, no compassion there. Just go ahead, do what you want. She's bitter. And so she goes. But look at what it says. It says in verse 3 that she went to a field after the reapers, and she just so happened to come to the portion of the field belonging to Boaz. Now think about that. The text makes it seem like this is chance and luck, but it's really poking at chance and luck, because think about it. Do you think that the God of the universe leaves the bringing about of the Messiah to chance and luck? This was ordained by God. And I love how the text does this. It does this in Esther as well. It's language like, maybe perhaps this will happen. Even here it says, she just so happened to come to the field of Boaz. And this is a word called providence. A lot of times we won't see the Lord move in miracles in our lifetime, but we will see him move like this all day long in providence. And that's what we're going to get here. So she's gleaning in the field. She's reaping. So Boaz comes on the scene and he says to the reapers, may the Lord be with you. May the Lord bless you. And so we see Boaz as a godly man already because he's fulfilling the law. He's allowing the gleaners and the reapers to glean from his fields. But Ruth catches his eye and he says to his servant, he says, who is this young woman? And I want you to see how this servant pokes fun at her and shows how she's an outcast. He keeps using this term. He says, oh, she is the young Moabite woman who returned with Naomi from the land of Moab. He's saying it over and over. The Moabite from Moab, nobody special. Don't worry about her. But he says she asked to glean here after the reapers, and thus she came and has remained from morning until now. And she has been sitting in the house for a little while. But Boaz said to Ruth, listen carefully, my daughter. Do not go and glean in any other field. Furthermore, do not go on from this one, but stay here with my maids, and let your eyes be on the field. which they reap, and go after them. Indeed, I have commanded the servants not to touch you. So Boaz is telling her, look, you won't just be a gleaner. You're a harvester now. You can keep coming back. And so look at what we're doing. We're moving from the judges to this, to a man like Boaz. And so Ruth comes back and reports everything back to Naomi. And she perks up. I told you, she's moving from bitter. Now she's getting better. It says in verse 20, Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, may he be blessed of the Lord, who has not withdrawn his kindness to the living and to the dead. Now all her language is changing now. Now we move into chapter 3. Naomi starts to scheme. Naomi comes up with a plan. It says, Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you? Now is not Boaz our kinsman, with whose maids you were? Behold, he winnows barley at the threshing floor tonight. Wash yourself, therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your best clothes, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. It shall be when he lies down, that you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go and uncover his feet and lie down. Then he will tell you what you shall do. And she said to her, all that you say, I will do. Now this plan is pretty risky. It's bold, but it's not risque. It's not scandalous. And you do get different commentators saying that this was risque and scandalous, and they give more of a sexual connotation to it. But a more conservative position toward this was that she cleaned herself up and made herself available for marriage to show him that she was available, changing her garments, taking off the clothing of widowhood, and putting on something that showed her availability. But it's very risky because somebody could discover her, they could misunderstand her, or she could even die. Or let's think about this one. Boaz could even say no and shame her. But guys, it works. And this is why we brought up property redemption laws and levirate marriage up when we were in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. Both of them were in chapter 25. I don't know if you remember those. But this is what Boaz is going to have to appeal to. And he tells her in verse 11, my daughter, do not fear. I will do whatever you ask. For all my people in the city know that you are a woman of excellence. This is Proverbs 31 language. Now, it is true that I am your close relative. However, there is a relative closer than I. And see, this is why we slow down in Leviticus 25 and Deuteronomy 25, where it talked about levirate marriage and property redemption laws, because this is what's about to come up. And Boaz knows the law well. He knows about levirate marriage, but he knows that there is a relative closer than him. And so this is where we get the word kinsman redeemer. And so a kinsman, someone of your family being able to redeem you, not only a woman, but property. And I used to laugh when my professor said this. He said it's a running joke in Jewish culture that when your older brother brings a woman home to the family, all the brothers need to check her out, because one day, if something happens to your brother, this may be your wife one day. You'll have to take her in. And that was just always hilarious to me. I'm just picturing guys sitting on the couch saying, hey, big bro, don't do that one. I can't handle that one. And so Boaz goes to pull this off. In chapter 4, it says, Boaz went up to the gate and sat down there. And behold, a close relative of whom Boaz spoke was passing by. And he said, turn aside, friend, sit down here. Boaz is very strategic and shrewd because he brings up the property first. In verse 3, he says, hey, we have Naomi here, and she's come back from the land of Moab, and she has to sell this piece of land who belonged to our brother Elimelech. We need to redeem it. And so the relative says, oh yeah, I want that. I want the land. Man, that just adds to my wealth. That builds up what I'm trying to do. But check this out in verse 5. Then Boaz said, on the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must acquire Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of the deceased, in order to raise up the name of the deceased on his inheritance. And the closest relative said, I can't do that. I can't redeem it for myself because it would jeopardize my own inheritance. And then he says, redeem it for yourself. Naomi, because of her poverty, is forced to sell the land. And there's a little entanglement here because Ruth married into the family. So she's part owner as well. And Boaz brings all of this to the table strategically and puts it in a certain order for this relative to give it up. Boaz, in his integrity and in his humility, is willing to give up his name to marry into Naomi's family, which is why the guy didn't want to do that. He says, I don't want to jeopardize my inheritance. I don't want to mess up my legacy. But Boaz was willing to do this. And I want you to see that what his humility and being willing to do that accomplished. And Boaz said to the elders and all the people, you are witnesses today that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech. Moreover, I have acquired Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, to be my wife in order to raise up the name of the deceased on his inheritance, so that the name of the deceased will not be cut off from his brothers or from the court of his birthplace. You are witnesses today. And so you see a lot of legal language happening here. And I want you to notice something, that when we talk about love, we like to talk about Ruth being a lovey-dovey book and romantic, but there's a lot of business going on in Ruth, a lot of transactions and legalities. And that just helps us to remember that love is more than romance. Love is a decision. It's an act of the volition to enter into something, to enter into a covenant. And there's so much covenant language going on here. And I think that would be helpful for our generation to know the seriousness of marriage isn't just a meet cute or pie in the sky, rose-colored glasses, or just a honeymoon. And this requires work. This requires a serious act of the will. Verse 13 says, so Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. Now listen to Naomi. She says, blessed is the Lord who has not left you without a redeemer today, and may his name become famous in Israel. May he also be to you a restorer of life and a sustainer of your old age. And now the book of Ruth ends. And guess what it ends with? It ends with a genealogy. So guess what we're about to do? About to get right back on track with the seed. We were in a dark time of Judges. God raises up this diamond in this book, a godly man of Boaz, a godly woman of Ruth, the Moabitess, and he moves and he uses her just like he used Rahab. And it's just not a special, inspired, romantic story. Look who comes through this story. Let's close it out. Naomi took the child and laid him in her lap and became his nurse. The neighbor women gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi, and they named him Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Ladies and gentlemen, we found our seed again, and we've dwindled him down even further. And now we've moved to David, and we know Christ flows from David. So think about that. Boaz's humility to redeem Ruth, in his humility, doing a kind act for her, not only helped her, Boaz married into the line of the seed, and Ruth did as well. And so you just see what obedience and godliness does. You never know what impact you're making on the world, but you could be doing something special. But you'll never get to see that unless you're obedient. God is only going to use obedient people. There are exceptions, things that he does in his sovereignty. But I'm talking about his normal means. He's going to work through obedient people. And this is so powerful. This is the most beautiful love story ever written because it is an inspired one. And that genealogy is traced even further. Verse 18. Now these are the generations of Perez. To Perez was born Hezron. To Hezron was born Ram. And to Ram, Amminadab. And to Amminadab was born Nahshon. And to Nahshon, Salmon. And to Salmon was born Boaz. And to Boaz, Obed. And to Obed was born Jesse. And to Jesse, David. The last word of the book of Ruth is David. Our seed has dwindled down further. God is saying it was dark for a while, but you got to know that I'm faithful. I'm ending this book with a genealogy, and we're picking up and we're moving forward. We're headed toward the seed, and I took you there through the greatest love story ever written. And why is that? Because it's one that actually changes history. You guys take care. Talk to you next time.